Good evening, Heal with Gold. How are you all? Isn't that great? I did a Sunday show, now a Wednesday show, so I am back full force. Happy to be here. Super excited to bring Jason to you because everything that he talks about, I'm super fascinated. And hi Marina, and I really feel like I need to hear everything that he has to say. And for those who were here last week, when Malika spoke, I felt that it was so godly that that was my first show back. And I feel that this is a great continuation, a great flow from last week's show. So I am super excited. I see a lot of people here, but I need to see your names. I don't know that you're here because if you don't comment, I don't know who you are. So please, please say hello so I can see who is here. And if you are watching from my page or from YouTube, share. If you don't want to share it right now, you can share it after the event. It doesn't matter. I want to remind everybody that the Business Life Universe book, I have a few copies left because some people grabbed it. It's $15 instead of $20 on Amazon with free shipping, and I will sign it for you. And also the Heal with Go group, the book. If you guys want it, I still have a few, and I'll be happy to sign it and ship it for you. So without further ado, hello, Lisa and Facebook user. If you don't approve StreamYard, I don't know your name. Without further ado, here is Jason. Hello, Jason. Oh, were you just drinking?
I'm good. Hi. I was just getting prepared.
Yeah, it's all good. I'm so excited to bring you to the group. And, we spoke and then we had misunderstandings of when your date was going to be. But I am so glad. And I'm telling you, I took a couple of weeks off because of my husband's illness. And then last Sunday, I forced myself to come back to the show. And the person who came was just so perfect for my comeback. And I truly feel that you are a great continuation from Sunday's show. And, you see how God has like an overview of what's going on, and he prepares and he puts all the pieces right in place. We don't know anything. We think we know, but we don't know anything. And here, it's just such a great timing. I want to talk to you about the topic of today's, but I want to know more about you. So let's start with you introducing yourself and what you do. We started talking a little bit behind the scenes, and so go back to it, and then I want to continue from there.
Sure. So first of all, it's great to be here. I know like you said, we were trying to make this happen for a little bit. So my name is Jason Wasser. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist here in South Florida. I have now a fully virtual practice. And what makes my practice different than the traditional therapist is that I specialize in mind-body integrative medicine approaches to solving a problem. So there are limitations of traditional talk therapy. You're tapping into the rational brain, and you're only kind of telling a story that you understand based on the limitations of the experience and the definitions and all the other stuff that we've gone through. So the modalities that I specialize in, one specifically called Neuroemotional Technique, or NET, is really my jam, my bread and butter. And it's something that I love doing, and it helps resolve triggers, traumas, stress patterns, chronic pain, as well as emotional self-sabotaging, self-limiting beliefs. So I use that both with kids, couples, and families, as well as with entrepreneurs, business owners, and so forth.
It's incredible. Tell me something, this NET, because I used to go to a chiropractor that checked me for allergies, and I used to hold the vial and he would lower my hand. Is that connected? Is that the same thing?
So what you're talking about is muscle testing, and there's multiple different ways of muscle testing. And then in kinesiology, which is the field that it came out of, there's kinesiology, muscle testing, kinesiology, and physical therapy, and orthopedic rehab. In this scenario, from the offshoot of chiropractic or chiropractic kinesiology, there's the world of applied kinesiology. And although I'm a licensed therapist, NET comes from that tradition of using muscle testing, neurological muscle testing. What we're looking for is the nervous system fight or flight response to some type of stimuli. In the situation that you were talking about was probably a homeopathic no-sode testing vial, which basically has the digital frequency or the liquid frequency of that substance to see if your body is going into some type of stimuli fight or flight response. Now, what does that mean? we don't know, right? Meaning like right off the basic understanding of it, you have to be trained in different approaches to it. The way I'm trained is to find where are the emotional, non-conscious, subconscious fight or flight triggers that, when you're expressing or describing something, you're talking about from your rational brain.
Mm-hmm.
This stuff is going into that nervous system physiological response. And we can find the deeper hidden stories, the deeper hidden trauma, the deeper hidden beliefs that are holding you back. That's like the Jenga piece that we want to yank, so everything else topples with it.
That it's incredible. But I want to tell you something fascinating. A lot of the people who are here and listening, they understand, they know that my husband is going through a health crisis. But I'm going to tell you something that it's really incredible. My husband started suffering from panic attacks about 7 years ago, and we attributed it to a lot of things that we were dealing at the time, adversities, and we felt that he was just dealing with that emotional
stress
situation, with that stress, with panic attacks. But listen to this. So my husband is extremely anemic. They don't know why he's anemic. And we're doing lots of tests. And one of the tests that we did in the hospital now was that capsule with the camera to see if he had any bleed. He takes blood thinners because of strokes. They couldn't find any bleeds, but this is what was interesting. Before he did that test, they had to do an MRI to make sure that it wouldn't block, he doesn't have any blockages. When they did that MRI, they found that his adrenal gland over the kidney was 3 times the size that it should be. And that adrenal gland is excreting cortisol. So the fight or flight, all of the panic attack and anxiety that he has suffered for the last 7 years were triggered by this adrenal gland.
Right.
So it's so interesting how it goes hand in hand. We are emotional beings and we are physical beings, and there is this. We're such a complicated machine.
For sure.
That everything has to take into consideration, but never at any point anybody said, let's check if there was something wrong with this gland. They were just saying, whatever, calm down or whatever. But here is even more interesting out of this whole situation. After he had his first stroke, he was all the time, his nose is running. He eats and then his nose starts running, always after he eats. So I'm telling every doctor that he's seen, why is his nose running after he eats? This is not something that used to happen.
Right.
So the reaction that I got from the medical establishment is, listen, if it bothers you, go out of the room when he's cleaning his nose,
Right.
This is not a big deal in the grand scheme of things. And I'm like, I'm not
right. And I look at it as that's another symptom of what's going on. It's not a cause, it's a symptom. I'm going to be looking at histamine responses. I'm going to be looking at food allergies. I'm going to be looking at hydrochloric acid deficiency, because why are you not breaking down the food? If that's happening after you're eating, you're going to have a whole cascade of biophysical, biochemical responses. And that's what separates everything I'm doing from the therapist. Usually you think therapy's neck up and doctors are, neck down, where I look at everything and I'm assessing for everything. And I'm finding stuff that doctors are missing. Now, I'm not diagnosing and assessing outside of my scope of practice, but all the time I'm finding stuff that doctors are missing that has a biochemical response.
Yeah.
Right. And when you're saying things that like, we're a machine and we have these emotions and we have these physical things going on. In fact, like back in the day, we didn't separate our mind and body. That's a newer, recent, last couple hundred years in that medical model of separating the mind versus body, versus the way I look at things is that I can't have the body without the mind, and the body, because there's no difference between the two. So when I am looking at stressors, when I am looking at ththings that are going on, all that stuff makes sense to me, that he's going through those things. And of course, adrenals is stress handling, and stress handling has to do with vitamin B deficiency. So if he's not absorbing and there's other things that are going on, then you're going to have a cascade of stuff that's happening both emotionally and physically.
Exactly. So the most interesting things happened when he was at this last hospital stay, because the gastro comes in and I said, you know what? I'm going to ask again because I've asked every doctor. And I asked about the cleaning of the nose after the meal. And he tells me, Miriam, I'm a gastro. Ask your primary. He leaves the room. Comes the hematologist. So I asked the hematologist. He says, I'm a hematologist. I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about. And then right after, and by the way, I'm on Zoom. This is during COVID, so I'm not allowed in the hospital. I'm on Zoom. My husband's in the hospital. We're meeting with these doctors. Comes the surgeon. I said, and this was like one after the other, same Zoom call. I said, I'm persistent. I'm going to ask the surgeon. So as a surgeon, I said, look, every doctor thinks that I'm a crazy wife. So one more, what's the big deal? I'm going to ask you. And I asked him the question. And he told me, oh, for sure, this is from the adrenal gland. And I'm giving him a medication because we need to dry the adrenal gland before the surgery. So if my medication is working, in a few days, you will see that this is going to stop. But doctors are treating organs. Each doctor is treating their own organ.
It's its own separate universe. They don't look at everything systemically, which is, I'm trained as a systems trained therapist. And then when I started applying these other modalities, it's now looking at a much larger system of incorporating these things. So yeah, when you're telling me all these symptoms, I'm like, I can list off 42 symptoms of adrenal fatigue or adrenal stressors. And the most chronic stuff that we are dealing with is being handled and, so to speak, filtered through our adrenals, because that's our stress handling process. So it makes sense to me in that regards. And that would be one of the first things that I would check as a therapist using neuroemotional technique. And we do have some, so to speak, body entry approaches to that. And, it would be an assessment. I'll be like, okay, here's where you need to go to. You need to go to a functional medicine practitioner or a nutritionist or something like that. So it's not shocking to me that the medical model is great for emergency medicine, as we're seeing right now, right, with the pandemic, and it's great for emergency medicine. But preventative medicine, that's where the whole other side of integrative nutrition, functional medicine, supplementation. I mean, we can get into a whole list of a protocol of why people are getting so sick with everything right now is vitamin D and melatonin levels. Why kids are less affected is melatonin. They're creating it naturally. And my guess is any kid who has gotten severely sick from COVID has very low melatonin, as well as people who have very low vitamin D. The average person in South Florida has lower than 40 as a vitamin D. They're like, oh, you're good if you have 33. If you want to be in optimal levels, you want to be between 60 to 80 in your vitamin D levels.
You're not going to believe, I did a blood test a few months ago. You're not going to believe what my numbers are. And I'm
17.
11.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not good. And the doctors are like, oh, you're fine if you get it up to the 20s. No. And it's mind-boggling, because anything below a 40 in research right now with COVID, you have a 50% chance of comorbidity with anything under 40. And people are taking, I'm taking 2,000 IUs a day.
No. 50,000.
50,000, right. Yeah. And that'll get it up pretty quickly, hopefully, unless there's something else going on like autoimmune things. But autoimmune is connected also to vitamin D deficiency. For me, I took 10,000 IUs for 6 months, and it went up 2 points from 33 to 34. I took 50,000 IUs. It went from 34 to 73 within less than a month. So we know that what we're being told is the clinical dose or nutritional dose of 2,000 IUs, 10,000 IUs is not a therapeutic dose. Right. Those are only after. You should be on 2 or 10,000. Now, again, I'm not prescribing, so no one should listen to me and say this is clinical advice. But what we're being told is that the therapeutic dose is 10,000, right? And that we should all be taking 2,000, but many people might need 10,000 a day. Some people might need more than that just to get their numbers into, but that's going to affect your mood. It's going to affect your stress. For men, there's crazy research on vitamin D and erectile dysfunction, but we'll give you Viagra. But
exactly.
Have you checked your vitamin D levels? And they're coming to me for therapy. And I'm like, well, let's look at this stuff first. Bring me your labs. Let me look at this. Let me send you to the right functional medicine people. Let me figure out what's going on in your stress handling, your cortisol levels. All that stuff is all connected to the cascade of us being able to handle what we need to handle. So none of what you're saying is shocking me.
Yeah. So we were going to talk, and I want to go there. And then I want to explore everything that you were saying now, because I have to tell you, being a caregiver, and there's a lot of people in the group who are caregivers. there is the two elements. One of the stress that we're under, and besides, everybody's going through stress from COVID, stress from being alone, stress from financial instability for some people. Then there's the stressors of all the people who are caregivers. And then there is the fact that we're handling the medical field. And trust me, everybody who is unhappy, because when we're in the middle of those doctor's appointments, we see what's going on and we're unhappy. And so many of us don't know what the type of service that you and all the people in integrative medicine, what they do. And I think that it's going to be super important for us to open up our minds to this entire world, because yes, I was familiar with chiropractic. I have asthma. I go to a acupuncturist for my asthma. I don't treat it with medication, only acupuncture. So I'm a little bit aware, but I'm not fully aware of everything that's out there.
Right.
So I want to know, and I think that there's people here who also want to know. And guys, you're free to leave us comments with questions or exactly what you want to know, so Jason will answer us. But let's talk about the stress. Let's
Sure.
Because stress is the number one killer right now. Maybe ever, I don't know. But
always. I mean, right? Anything that our body is not adapting to is considered a stressor. And usually we have 4 quadrants of, when I'm looking at something, I'm looking really into 4 domains to assess to see what's going on. So let's break it down. So if everybody kind of imagines a baseball field, the infield of a baseball field, and we'll put whatever issues they're coming in for on the pitcher's mound. And then I'll run 4 bases, right? First base will be the emotional side. What is there something that needs to be handled on that base, first base emotions? That'll be talk therapy, hypnosis, meditation, mindfulness, neuroemotional technique, and so forth. Second base would be would be toxins. Is the body and that person have been exposed to toxins that needs to be pulled out of their body? So we're talking about environmental and food and chemical and pesticides and preservatives and all of that stuff. Mold, right. All of those different things that are considered the world of toxins that can be affecting that.
By the way, can I just interrupt you for 1 second? I have a friend, she's an architect, she's Brazilian, she lives in California. Her job is she's changing now a little bit because she's adding other stuff, but her expertise was cleaning homes from toxins. And she was telling me, even furniture, they put products so it's easy to clean, so it doesn't stain. And all of that, toxins are coming out in the air. She has machines that
right. Well, they're going into your skin. You're sitting on all that stuff. And there are furniture companies. My family's in 3rd generation furniture business. One of the companies we work with, they have toxic free, dye free, right? And they even have to have labels on, you see it when you go to like Target and Walmart, like this has like the California prop, whatever, that these chemicals can cause cancer, right? There are furniture that most people are, if you're buying your stuff from any of the big box stores, the rooms to goes and this is all coming from China. There's no quality control. That's why, they can replace it for you because they're shipping it over by the cargo containers, right? Versus the higher end quality companies that are doing like, organic leather, and they're doing, right. Everything is being treated by more naturally. So it's like, well, why is furniture so expensive? Well, that's because you might be not getting these things as well. And that's, the wood might not be treated with this stuff, and the chemicals are not going to be, there might be more organic chemicals. Chemicals are still chemicals, right?
You're preaching to the choir. I'm a fashion designer and I produce clothing. So I buy my yarn in Italy. I make my fabric in Italy. I ship it to Portugal where we manufacture, where I go to these factories to see that they are certified clean air. And people don't understand what they're getting in China. I say to them, when you're buying something in America that costs $10, you need to understand the cost of shipping, right? How much is left for the person who made it and in the production of the fabric? You're getting chemicals. You're getting, there is zero oversight. And I went to factories in China, And I walked in and I walked out and I said, there's no way I can manufacture here. And it's exactly.
Well, you can feel it probably right when you walk in. And I know, like, for years I would walk into certain stores, or I'd walk by certain smells. Like, it's not even a smell, it's the chemical that your body's, right. And you can tell the difference between a candle that's like a natural organic soy candle versus a regular candle. I can't even light a non-soy based chemical that has any scents that aren't coming from pure essential oils, because I will automatically start itching. So imagine the average person who isn't as self-aware or aware of what their symptoms are going on, and like, I don't know what it is. It must just be allergies from the pollen. Yes, it could be. But all of these things that we're looking at, again, right, going back to this, the home run formula, right, is the first base is emotion, second base is toxins, third base will be nutritional deficiencies. So it's so interesting. So I just came from my chiropractor before I saw you, and we're trying to figure out some stuff that's going on for me. And he gave me an iodine supplement, and he's like, let's taste it. And I want to try it and muscle test and whatever it is. And I'm like, I barely taste it. He's like, I can smell it through my mask.
Oh my God. Iodine.
And it was
iodine.
I was chewing it. I'm like, I barely taste it. So it's interesting enough, right? I eat a very healthy diet. I eat organic, I eat gluten-free, no real junk food, very little processed foods as best as possible. Ben and Jerry's is good every once in a while too. So, we're all still human and figuring it out. But I'm like chewing on this thing, and I'm like, nope, maybe 5%, 10% of what you think it's supposed to taste like, I'm tasting it. So does that mean I have an iodine deficiency? Does it mean that my receptor sites are off? I don't know, but I just know that there's something that's going on with my nervous system and my body and my physiology that's affecting that. Right now, I know I have subclinical thyroid issues. Majority of people who are looking and they're go to the doctor and like, no, your thyroid numbers are fine. Go to a functional medicine person, or just look up the numbers of what functional medicine says about what borderline thyroid issues are. I would say they say 30% of Americans have thyroid issues. I would say 70 to 80% have thyroid issues. So again, going back, right, first base is emotion, second base is toxins, third base is nutrition, home plate is structure. Chiropractic, physical therapy, acupuncture, OTP, right? Anything that's, the physical side of things. So here's the crazy thing. Any stressor can cause a deficiency or a challenge in any one of those bases. So when this modality was created, it was originally created at a chiropractic, and they found that chronic people were coming over and over again for adjustments. Why wasn't it healing? Right. And they found, Dr. Walker realized that there was an emotional component, that when they thought about the injury, or they thought about the moment that they had the car accident or whatever, when being adjusted, the adjustment would hold, and they wouldn't necessarily need to come back over and over again for that thing. So he's like, okay, that's interesting. Let me figure out how to figure out what's going on, and can this affect other systems in the body too, the organ systems and everything. So he started connecting with the applied kinesiology world of Chinese medicine, meridians and body organs and emotions and toxins. And he created what is now called Neuroemotional Technique. And the tool we use to look at things is that home run formula. Is it showing up as emotional? Is it showing up as a toxin, nutritional? And we can look at all those things and pull out one of those pieces, and it can affect everything else. Because when you pull the thorn out, the body can finally start healing. And sometimes you have 4 thorns, and sometimes you have 1, right? And sometimes you have more. But the body knows how to heal itself when there's things that are holding it in its own way are being stuck. And that's what's so great about chiropractic. Chiropractic isn't just about bone manipulation. It's a nervous system reset. So if there is a subluxation, which is the term they call where there's the nerve and the bone is kind of like being compressed, they're not just moving the bone, they're allowing the nervous system to turn back on so it can go back into a homeostasis of healing. So that's the beautiful philosophy of chiropractic. It's actually one of the most holistic and natural approaches, that if you get out of the way, the body will know what to do.
I am a big believer. I've gone to chiropractic. I'm a big believer, but I am loving the whole concept of the functional medicine, of looking at every area and seeing it, the whole picture, because through my navigating the medical system, this is crazy. Yeah. I said they're treating organs, they're not treating a human being. And I am looking for a way to look at this from a much more holistic approach. But when it comes to stresses, there's so much that we put on ourselves, right? There's so many expectations. There's so many self-imposed stressors. And it's everybody knows. Don't take this, say no, don't expect. We all know the knowledge we have. We it's like when somebody is nervous, you tell them calm down, breathe. If we knew how to calm down and breathe when we had a trigger, it wouldn't be happening. So what is the process that we need to go through to start implementing a life with different habits that are going to teach us to manage this, and not just that, but that we understand what our limitations are? Because I'm going to tell you, like right now, yes, we're going through crisis, right? It's not every day, thank God, that you have a stroke, you go through 6 months that you have to deal with the situation. So in a way, it's temporary. But the amount of stress that I'm going through right now is so off the chart. I go to sleep, I was feeling like a pain in the back of my head. And I'm like, oh my God, am I getting a stroke? If I get a stroke,
Right.
who's going to take care of him? And a lot of it is, like you said, it's every quadrant is being affected. How do we know, as human beings on this planet, just trying to survive, how can we turn off the stress that we're feeling?
So one of the things that is really powerful about our mind and body, and I'll just, from here on out, I'll just, about us, but everybody who's listening should know that I'm referring both to the mind and the body as one complete unit, is if you look at the neurology, the brain side of things, about how we were created, that we have this triune brain theory. We have a 3-brain theory. And the rational brain, the neocortex, is all about putting things into categories, making sense of it. We know what's going on. We know it's a Wednesday night. We know that it's 8:26, right? Those are logical things. We know that this thing is out there, but if we're in our home or we're being socially distanced and we're wearing a mask and whatever, we're going to be, right? We can, there's things that we know consciously, cognitively, intellectually. That's rational. That's the neocortex. Then you have your mammalian brain. The mammalian brain is responsible for 2 main things: emotions and timelessness. So it's like when that song comes back on from when we were kids and you're all of a sudden back in that memory, that's sending a cascade of physiological, biochemical responses to your body to react in a certain way. So I just want to add one more thing to help people really understand where I'm coming from. We think of emotions as psychological, but what they actually are physiological responses or biochemical responses. And research has shown that emotions are actually carried through neuropeptides of our DNA. And if anybody's interested in going down that rabbit hole, Dr. Candace Pert, Molecules of Emotion, Bruce Lipton, Biology of Belief, but most specifically Dr. Candace Pert's work of finding that emotions really are. So that makes sense that if we have some type of stressor, of course, it could show up not just us in a behavioral type of symptomology, but of course, it can show up also in a physical scenario. So we can have a pain in an issue in our knee, and it can be from an emotional stressor. And that's the beautiful thing about NET and neuroemotional technique, is that we're not only talking about what you want to be okay with or what you want to be neutral about, that you're proactively working on, that but chronic physical pain, we can assess using the muscle test and going through the protocol to find out that there's a chronic stressor that's showing up as a physical symptom, and what's the emotional story that your mind body's carrying, and we can help reset that nervous system response to it so your body can then continue to heal. And I've seen dozens of clients over the last many years that are coming in because they've gone from doctor to doctor, PT, OT, rehab, whatever, orthopedics, and have found an NET practitioner, and we figure out that this is the emotional stressor. This is the story. We go through the process, and all of a sudden they're magically, rapidly getting better in their physical symptoms. Now, I didn't adjust. I didn't treat. I didn't, do any manipulation. I didn't do any physical therapy. We're just removing the thorn of a physiological fight or flight repetitive stress pattern. And that's the beauty of this process. So we need to realize that right, that's the mammalian brain, and the reptilian brain is survival instinct, fight, flight, or freeze. So when those 3 brains are working together, we're great. We're proactive. We're accomplishing things. We're on a mission. When any one of those parts of the 3 brains are non-congruent or they're not working with each other, that's when chaos starts to happen. And that's what we would call a stressor. And again, that stressor can become from an emotion, it can come from a toxin, it can come from a nutritional deficiency, or it can come from a injury, right? That's, structural stuff. So how do we avoid stress? We can't. How do we adapt to stress? We can, using these type of modalities, right? Going back to vitamin D, when you were talking about asthma, the amount of research that's out there on vitamin D deficiency and asthma is massive, hand-in-hand correlation. And the fact that probably no one has ever mentioned it to you before tonight is my guess. And why you have it, right?
Never.
Right. So my guess is over long term, between that and some other things that might help you from that perspective, you might actually start noticing a marked difference in that, just with a simple vitamin that we've all known to take since we were a little kid. But again, being in South Florida, literally, my sister was told this by a doctor, your numbers, don't worry about your number. It was like 23 or 30, whatever. It was so low. And they're like, well, don't worry about it. And I'm like, how are these people not looking like a practical, simple solution? Is because that system, unfortunately, isn't trained to look at these things in that way. And again, that's why it's a good sick care. It's good for emergency care, but it's not good for wellness care. And half my family are medical doctors, and they know this is the world that I'm in, and this is what I become an expert in. The people I'm training under are experts. One of my mentors, just to really ride this piece home, is Dr. Dan Monti. He's a psychiatrist. He's also the chair of the integrative medicine department at Jefferson Medical School in Philadelphia. So it was a program. It is now officially a department on par with oncology and radiology and pediatrics. It's its own thing. It's the Marcus Institute from, Bernie Marcus from Home Depot is very much into, surprisingly, very much into alternative medicine. All the major research of NET is coming out of Jefferson Medical School. Not only that, it's now becoming part of their credited course curriculum in the entire medical department. So what we would think is alternative medicine is really being studied. Functional imaging, MRIs. Dr. Andrew Newberg, who's one of the top neurological imaging specialists in the world, was at Penn Medical, is now at Jefferson Medical. You can find, he's got really awesome books about, is our brain hardwired for God? He's one of the founders of neurotheology, what happens to our brain and body during spiritual and religious experiences. So he's doing all the brain mapping of our NET study. And we have a whole team of people who are doing the other stuff, the intervention and the research and all that other stuff. It's being published in the Journal of Cancer Survivorship. And we're talk about stress, right? PTSD is stress, post-traumatic stress disorder. So if you're feeling better, right, our community is going to have massive PTSD from this pandemic. What do we do? Well, find a neuroemotional technique practitioner, find a mind-body practitioner, get your nutrition right, get your stress handling right. How? Exercise, breathing, real proper nutrition, making sure your supplementation is okay, finding a functional medicine practitioner, and figure out what the stress patterns are specific for you. And that's where NET comes in and why I love it so much and it's so powerful.
How did you get from family therapy to doing that? Because it's very different. No, like, am I wrong? Because
yeah, you would never think one has anything to do with the other, because again, I'm so out of the box according to most people, right? So I always was searching for stuff like this, and I was always going to practitioners, but I never knew I can do this. I never knew a therapist that does this type of stuff. And I'll go to chiropractors and alternative medicine practitioners, and there was some like holistic therapists, but it was like what we would now call mindfulness, right? What we would maybe do the tapping, and like that's as far down the rabbit hole as it would go. But the tapping, like, is what's interesting. Like, people ask me, like, well, what do you think about EMDR? I think it's great. What do you think about EFT, the emotional freedom technique, right? The tapping, that's great, but you don't know what's going on. You don't know the process. NET takes that, but we actually go into the neurological, and we also go into the intellectual side of, here's the story, here's the snapshot, here's what you went through that your body is storying, and here's the narrative around it that's different than the way your rational mind is telling it. So here's the disconnect, right? So for years, I was going through stress and some other things, and I would go to a chiropractor and he would do muscle testing and whatever. And then 10 or 11 years ago, give or take, I was having some significant major panic attacks. And I was at a conference actually at University of Miami's Integrative Medicine Department with Dr. Jana Knopfel, who is not still practicing anymore, but she was the head of the department. And someone came in and did an NET demo, a chiropractor, who subsequently became a friend and a colleague. But I'm like, oh, that's really cool. a few months later, a friend of mine's like, oh, you should go meet so-and-so. They do NET. I know you're still having your panic attacks. Why don't you try it? I'm like, great. 3 sessions, my panic attacks disappeared.
Oh my God.
Within 3 sessions. By the second session, it was radically better. By the first session, it was really good. Second session, it was radically better. Third session, I remember walking into my old office. I was in downtown Hollywood. The issue that I was thinking about that bothered me popped up on my brain, and it literally felt like I had Vaseline on my brain, and I literally felt the issue slide off my brain. It was the weirdest thing ever. I remember because I was standing outside my building, going into the back door up to my steps into my office and from the building. I'm like, okay, that was weird. A month later, I signed up for my first training. And now multiple years later, so there's 3 levels of NET certification. I think I'm one of like maybe 7 or 8 mental health practitioners in the world that have their highest level 3 certification. There are thousands of certified practitioners, and there's a lot of level 3 certifieds. But from the mental health side, there's probably only a handful of us in the world.
Oh my God. We're going to have to meet after this, because I have some stuff we need to.
We all have some stuff.
I don't know. You need to get ready.
Right. Well, Esther Hicks has a great quote from the Law of Attraction world. She goes, "You're never going to get it all done, and you're never going to get it all right."
Yeah.
So we have to be a little bit more patient with ourselves. We have to be right. That whole thing of like, be kind to yourself. It's true. Like, we're under such critical, dominant thoughts of going back to what you're saying about stress and beliefs, and I have to accomplish this, and I have to take care of that, and I have to be responsible for this, and God forbid what happens to me, right? Those are all stories that we've somehow chosen to buy into that become dominant narratives in our life. This is where the family therapy side comes in, right? Dominant narratives that either by culture, by religion, by gender, by family, by religion, by whatever, by trauma, we have chosen consciously and unconsciously to continue to buy into, which then creates these self-imposed roles that become rules to us. So when I'm doing NET with someone, I'll actually find out underneath the hood, what are those rules? What's those programming that's holding them stuck? That's causing all these behaviors on what they're showing up in the world as to be their interactions. But I want to find that, again, that Jenga piece and yank it out from underneath that. What's the belief system? What's the core value? What's the core operating function for them to be doing that, and the belief that's under that, and change that in their nervous system with them, so that they don't have to be that way anymore. They can be proactive instead of reactive. They can choose their options instead of only being compelled to respond in one specific way. And that's stress, right?
I want to bring 2 questions that Marina has. So she asked, who do you go to panic attacks? So from what I understand, Jason did NET, which now he does, and that helped him. I believe that each case is different. Look, you saw that my husband, at the end of the day, 7 years of panic attacks, and now we know that he has an issue with the adrenal gland. So it could be sometimes a physical thing, sometimes it could be something else.
Right. Well, you want to work with someone who's able to assess all categories, right? And the average therapist or the average, like, oh, well, we'll be like, breathe, meditate, blah, 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 blah. Right. And my perspective is you want to work with someone who's looking at the full comprehensive package. There is no difference between mind and body. It's the mind body, right? So when we're talking about panic attacks and anxiety on one level, I believe is a great teacher. It's a GPS. Instead of running away from it, delve into it. Start having conversations with it. I know this sounds so weird, but when I was having my panic attacks, I remember one time I sat on the floor in my living room and had a conversation with it and said, what are you here to teach me? Because you keep showing back up and I keep trying to run away from you and you keep coming back. So maybe if I address you, if I talk to you, if I have a relationship with you, that's somewhat right. You'll let me know why you're here, what I need to learn from, so you can then go bother somebody else. And that was part of the process of like, I do believe that anxiety and panic attacks are at some level teaching you that you're not being in authenticity with your truest version of yourself. You're at some way, shape, or form, you're under attack. Your mind and body thinks it's under attack because you're not either showing up a certain way, you're not doing things a certain way, your belief system is not in alignment with your truest authenticity. So therefore, the way that you're doing things and being and believing isn't working for you, it's working against you. And I think that's what a panic attack can be there to teach you. So
But,
panic attack and anxiety attack, they're pretty much, I would interchangeably use those words.
uh-huh. But don't you think that sometimes is worry, when you are worried to a level that you cannot control, that you feel like you lost control, can't you have an anxiety attack um, because of acute worry?
Yeah, when we're talking about panic attacks, you're really talking about like that heart rate going up. You feel like you can't breathe. You might start sweating. You might get dizzy, right? Those are really acute panic attacks where you feel like the room's closing in on you, suffocating, stuff like that. Worry, chronic, right? There, if I look at it from the lens of like through the Chinese medicine perspective, worry, doubt, all those things are coming from a certain disposition. So, when you're looking at, lenses, right? To see the world through a different pair of lenses, what's the pattern? Because it's not just going to show up in that one area. What other things are going on in that person's world
Mm-hmm.
where there may be similar themes and patterns that may not be worry or doubt, but there's a set of emotionality, a set of beliefs that are predisposing them to carrying that experience. So again, focusing specifically on the symptom, the panic attack, the anxiety, the worry, isn't going to solve the problem. What's the collective belief system? What's the collective experiences? What's the collective story that they're carrying that needs to be played with that can finally solve this problem versus going and doing it piecemeal or attacking it bit by bit by bit?
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay, let's read this one. I'm a PT, and I wish medical schools and other medical professional schools taught the holistic whole body and mind approach to healing. It all totally makes sense. Yeah.
Right. So as a PT, you can, anybody who's a licensed medical practitioner at a master's level and above to assess, diagnose, and treat. It's not all medical practitioners, but as a PT, you can get trained in neuroemotional technique. My guess is you can also go and become an applied kinesiology diplomate. But there's tons of modalities out there for medical professionals to do this type of work. As a PT, you can specialize in functional medicine, and there's the Functional Institute of Functional Medicine University. There's a lot of really good qualified certified trainings for people that are master's level and above, again, to assess, diagnose, and treat it with a license. To be able to get into these things and incorporate it into the practice. So that person who's a PT, you're already doing muscle testing when you're checking strength and injuries. Using the muscle testing from this other perspective is going to be fabulous. And obviously happy to, if you want to reach out to me, I'm happy to point you in the right direction.
Incredible. Talk to me about breathing, meditating. I know it's the in thing to do, but I'm going to tell
Since
you.
the 1600s now. Yeah. So.
I'm going to tell you, I don't enjoy breathing.
Right.
I mean, like deep breathing. I breathe like very shallow. I don't have time. Yeah, I'll tell you, Jason. We'll start.
Well, the words you're saying, I don't have time to breathe, which is a misnomer, because you're going to breathe whether you like it or not. Because if you're not breathing, you're not staying alive. But that's all stress handling, right? So if you're like constricted, talk about lungs and asthma and stuff like that. So if we can play a little bit, right? Yes. So lungs in Chinese medicine is the middle meridian. Okay. Mm-hmm. Lungs and a few other places. But the most common emotional disposition for lungs is grief, sadness, yearning, despair, or the emotional connection to lungs.
Interesting. I was told that already by my acupuncturist.
Okay, right. So that's right, the 5-element theory. So when it's showing up and manifesting, so when you have those people that are walking around, and everybody who's listening knows this person, they're walking around, they're going like this. That's a lung disposition. When you have the people that are constantly like, in fear mode, they say like, I'm so afraid I peed my pants. That's bladder meridian. That's the water meridian. Wood, they're stubborn, they're stuck, they're not bendable. Well, if things don't work out my way, what happens to those type of people? They end up getting really angry. Mm-hmm. What happens when things are never turning up their way and they start blaming everybody else? That turns into resentment. Mm-hmm. That's the wood meridian, stubborn, resentment, anger, right? Thyroid and reproductive organs and stuff like that fire, right? Your life force, your heart, your thyroid, your adrenals, your reproductive organs, those are the life force organs. Stomach and spleen, is earth. So we're talking about low self-esteem, over concern. The people, anybody out there who's constantly over invested in everybody else's drama and stuff that's going on. There's more, everybody, the Royals thing that just happened the other day, and they're like, that's all they're talking about, right? And their whole life is consumed by all of everybody else's stuff. That's an earth disposition, right? So we have all of these different patterns.
And which body part is that?
Earth is stomach and spleen.
Stomach and spleen.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, but I mean, mostly stomach for sure. So, right, but it's right, and it doesn't mean necessarily you're going to have the symptom in your stomach. But again, these are dispositions, and they're lenses into where to start looking at what's going on in your world as an assessment tool to now, like, okay, so now where do I go next? So, right, lungs. Okay, so we can talk about the physical. So yes, do you have asthma? Well, why do you have asthma? Is it nutritional deficiency? Is it toxins? Is it emotions? Or is it, right? It's the same thing. We're just washing and repeating that wheel. But where are you starting? Are you starting with the symptom? Or are you looking at the things that are holding it all together? And really, we're causing a disease. We're looking at a disease model versus it's a collection of symptoms. But why? How does that all make sense?
But now let me ask you a question. First of all, this is fascinating to me. I definitely, if I would have to guess, I'm assessing my life here in front of God knows who, but I would say that grief with me is the thing there. But my asthma attacks happen, they're triggered by a cold. I have a cold, it develops into asthma. I don't usually get asthma out of nowhere. Maybe I had it once, but usually it's triggered by cold. Right. So here's my question. When that happens, when the asthma is triggered by a cold, is that still related to the emotional? And I don't deny that there is grief in there.
Well, everything is connected to everything. So I can't say that there's like what percentage of what it would be, but I would still go back into immune handling, right? And again, going back to the vitamin D numbers is right there. So immune system and vitamin D is hand in hand, right? Asthma is hand in hand. Autoimmune disorders and vitamin D, hand in hand. So when you're already susceptible to picking up stuff, environmental, let's just call a cold an environmental toxin because it's a virus, right? Even though it could be a bacteria, but they're treating it as a virus, or they're sometimes treating bacterial infections and when it's really a virus or whatever else it could be. Because how do they know? They're just throwing darts at a board. Right. Which is why when your doctor was probably checking you with a vial, like I have a whole bunch of vials that are, is it a virus, a bacteria, whatever, parasite, radiation, chemical, whatever. And I can figure out what's going on. But the idea that everything is connected to everything. So unless and that's why it's called, in the world of functional medicine, why it's called, functional, is that people are going to doctors and they're told their labs are all within normal limits, but they're still on 4 medications and they feel like crap. That's not normal. That's not healthy. So functional medicine is saying what's really going on. Now, it doesn't mean you may not need a prescription for something, but we're going to look at a wider lens. We're going to look at a wider net. We're going to tighten up the numbers because if the average person going to Walmart and eating non-organic processed food and sugars and soda and doing all this other and tons of alcohol and other things, and those are the numbers that we're basing the peak of the bell curve on, why do I want my numbers to be in comparison to what their numbers are? And that's when within normal limits of our labs are basing it on. So functional medicine has tightened up that bell curve and the numbers are much more succinct. And that's why you have a lot of people who have subclinical infections. What does that mean, subclinical? You would never know it by looking at the labs like, oh, well, we'll keep an eye on this for the next 5 years. Meanwhile, 5 years in, now someone has major thyroid issues. But it could have been avoided, or they have gut issues, or they have hormone issues, or vitamin D deficiency.
Let me tell you something. My husband is anemic. The whole time the doctors were saying we have to keep an eye on it. The anemia started after his first stroke.
Right.
2 weeks ago, he collapsed. I had to call the ambulance because suddenly he gets to the hospital and his hemoglobin is 6. So, but everybody else, all the doctors were like, well, he's a 9, he's a 10. We'll keep an eye on it, but they weren't trying, they weren't doing anything.
Well, they don't know the origin of, and I think that's where functional medicine comes in. Again, it's a Band-Aids.
Mm-hmm.
It's wonderful and it's necessary, right? But their thing is triage.
Yeah.
It's not going, they're not detectives. They're not sleuths. They're not House MD, right? And in a way, like House MD is great because they figured out the core thing, and they still figured out what was going on. So I would say that's a lot more in that regards, to being a problem solver. But what I'm looking at and what my colleagues or the people that I refer to and that I trust are looking at is, why is this starting in the first place? Why is there a vitamin D deficiency? You live in South Florida. So what's going on? Is it usually my first guess would be there's a gut issue. Is it absorption? Are you not breaking down and absorbing your nutrients? So do you have high protein counts in your blood? Do you have leaky gut? Is your blood sugar handling off? Do you also have high cholesterol? All of that is now what we would consider a metabolic syndrome. So now what's going to be happening? Let's also check your thyroid numbers, because your thyroid are probably going to be way off and out of whack. And what's going to go on with your iodine deficiency and stress and mood and handling, and all of those things are all connected, except now you've gone to 6 different doctors.
Yes.
With 6 different copays who have nothing to do with each other and not communicating with each other, and you're getting piecemeal solutions versus going to a functional medicine practitioner and they're looking at the comprehensive lens of everything and then figuring it out from a deeper. Now, they still might send you back there to get the specific prescription or the right in hand, but they're more likely to be looking at the wide net and the under, the thing that's holding it. What's the glue that's holding all of this together? And that's really the focus of where medicine needs to go in the future, and why I'm such a proponent as a therapist for working and collaborating with practitioners who do these things. I had a psychiatrist in my practice before I closed the office at the beginning of the pandemic. There was a psychiatrist on the other side of the wall. I was in that office for over 4 or 5 years. Not once did I refer a client to her.
Mm-hmm.
Because why? My job is to get you off all of this stuff.
Right.
And here's the kicker. She came by one day with like soda from her office. She's like, oh, I bought the wrong brand of soda. And my response to her, was that crap. I dropped in the S word. That crap is not allowed in my practice. With a big smile on my face. She's like, what do you mean? I'm like, aspartame, this chemical, that chemical, preservatives, whatever. Oh, I don't know what you're talking about. The research doesn't show that. I'm like, I don't know what research you're not looking at. Well, I'm a medical doctor. I would know these things. Okay.
Yeah. No, it's poison. Poison. How do you do the NET over Zoom?
I don't. NET is not one of those modalities that is done over Zoom. There are people who will do distance-based testing for other modalities. NET is, again, a journal published, clinically researched, now being backed by Jefferson Medical School. We're validated. We are probably one of the top most researched modalities in the world at this moment. That's being, again, published in major journals. So we have to, the muscle test has to be done in person, right? We are actually getting, it's a biofeedback tool. Is the nervous system having a fight or flight response to what's going on, to the semantic, whether it's a verbal statement or an emotional thought or an injury point? So we need to gauge that in real time in person with that person and then walk them through the protocol. Are there other modalities that are out there that can help? Sure. But as far as neuroemotional technique, there's a wonderful, wonderful network of certified practitioners pretty much everywhere in the world. And if you can't find them, email the NET office, because there's some countries that are, regulations and licensure standards. So if there's not one near you, there's people who've taken trainings who aren't certified, but are still very good practitioners because they haven't been certified yet. So if you're in an area and you're out here and you're listening to it, just, and you can't find someone near you, email or call the NET office, and they'll try to connect you with someone.
I'm lucky because I'm near you. So.
Right. Yeah, we've got a good system here in South Florida. We have a bunch of really amazing practitioners down
Jason, you have to, I don't know if there is a saying in English. In Portuguese, there is a saying that you lift up your sleeves. Like, is there a saying like that in English? Like,
could be. What's the rest of the statement?
To get ready for work, to get ready for a lot of work.
Yeah.
Because we need help here. I'm telling you, because I definitely feel like it's time for us to have a different approach. I mean, right now, people ask me, because I'm selling my house, and people ask me, where do you want to move to? Where are you going? And I'm like, frankly, I'm looking for a parking spot at the Cleveland Clinic.
Right.
If I can find something right there and I don't have to commute. But Dark
Yeah,
humor.
that's tricky because right, if that's becomes someone's reality, right? Like it's become your reality, that becomes so consuming. And then our identity and our brand, right? Our life just becomes totally wound up in that. Like we're totally wound up in this pandemic. We've been totally wound up in the politics in the last, whatever, the chaos of everything. We're now totally wound up in the last 48 hours with with Meghan and Harry and rightfully so, because we're talking about mental health issues. We're talking about suicide. We're talking about racism and bigotry and stuff like that. These are conversations we need to have that need to be out there in the limelight, but they're also very stressful conversations if not A, handled the right way, and B, if not discussed with the right people versus people who just walk off their set because they think it's BS. So you have to A, surround yourself by the right people. If you want to decrease your stress, surround yourself by the right people. Stop listening to the news. Stop watching the news. I don't watch. I think I watched live stream TV the other day for the first time in months. And it was not, I'll put on tennis every once in a while, but it was like Stanley Tucci exploring Italy, which was awesome. But I don't watch live television. I don't watch the news. I don't really do that. I check the news once a day on my, on the computer, but that's about it. So those are things that, additionally that are stressors that
I
you're just letting it in.
Jason, I stopped that such a long time ago because my conclusion was the following. Nobody is asking me for my opinion. Nobody is asking me for my help. I feel like I could solve lots of problems, but nobody cares what I have to say. And therefore, I'm out of the game.
Right.
And I take care of other things. To me, my biggest stress is health. And that's why I thought it was such a great timing to have you on the show, to bring you over, because I know that a lot of the people that we serve in this community understand what I'm going through. They're going through very similar situations. I want to put here this comment. Thanks, Miri, always bringing the professionals and people with such valuable messages and stories. My pleasure, Melissa. I'm just so happy that this worked out. Jason and I were trying to get, but I'm booked already till May.
Yeah, I'm booked until the summer with my podcast. So yeah, I know.
Yeah, it's fantastic because it's such amazing content, and people are now ready and willing and available to provide this value to each other. I mean, this is such
this is the new age, right? This, they used to talk about the age of Aquarius, but this is really finally, like, it took a pandemic for people to reevaluate who they're hanging out with, where are they spending their money, where do they really want to live? Like I said, my family's furniture business, we've been so busy because people are finally investing in their home. They're like, oh, well, we want to make this third bedroom into a entertainment center. We want to have, our family stay with us for 3 months after they've been, cleared for quarantine. So we want to make sure we have the right furniture, right? So people are really going back to the roots of where we need to be. More time in nature, cooking more. I know people have been drinking more too, right? But those of us who are taking it seriously and are being mindful of everything versus some of my clients that are out partying and drinking in Fort Lauderdale anyway. But those aren't people I'm hanging out with anymore. And we're able to see with clear vision what we want in our life, what we don't want in our life. And I think the blessing is the blessing of the pandemic is that. Unfortunately, there's a lot of loss and grief and scary. It's scary for sure. It's scary.
It's so interesting because you brought up the whole concept of lung and grief and this. And I think that being an empath, it is my personal grief.
Oh boy, yeah.
And it's the grief of everybody that I love and I'm connected to. I start, you talk grief, and then I think like flashes in front of me.
And that's part of the story and the narrative, right? Of a self-imposed rule. Why is it what will happen to you if you weren't that type of person? What will people believe about you? What are you afraid people will believe about you? What would you say about yourself? How are you going to judge it? Right? It's all judgments that aren't serving us. So, right, to really wrap it and tie it all together is most of the time. So I'll share it with the story because as our people are known to do, to give an answer with a story, right? Is I had a new client today and they were talking about this issue that they had financially. And I'm like, listen, I'm your therapist. Everything here is confidential. What are you making? What's your number? What's your combined family income? And they gave me their number and they're in the top 1% of income earners in the country. And I'm like, you're asking the wrong questions. The problem that you're trying to solve is the wrong problem. And a lot of us are doing that. We think the description or the belief or the assumption that we carry really is the issue. the problem really at the end of the day isn't the issue, because then we'll find out that really isn't a problem at all, except for that which we believe. And then we make our action steps and our experiences filtered through that. So the idea of like being an empath, yes, I'm also an empath. That's probably one of the reasons why I'm a therapist. But to know that at the end of the day, when my sessions are done at the end of the 45 or 60 minutes or 90-minute consult or whatever it is, I have to move on to my next client. Now, it doesn't mean that if I have an idea that I'm not going to email my client, but I'm not going to do it at 3 a.m. in the morning, right? Boundaries during, especially, right, self-imposed rules are part of our conversation.
Yes.
Boundaries, which is a whole nother conversation we can talk about in May, is the most important thing. And there's nothing wrong with you with saying this doesn't work for me and letting someone else know that.
Oh, we're going to have you back. Talk about boundaries. I don't know that I'm going to manage to wait until May between you and me, but I'll
hold you to a boundary on that. So.
I'm going to connect with you, and we're going to continue this conversation. I want to thank everybody who's here. Jason, I'm so grateful. I think that you opened up my mind to seeing medical health, and from all of these 4 quadrants. I think that this was fantastic. It made such a visual, clear image of me, of assessing all of the areas of my life. I'm going to connect with you. Please send me all of your information so people can reach out to you. The group is only women, so you're not in there, but they will reach out to you privately if they have any questions.
For sure.
I'm really, really grateful. I can't wait to meet you in person. And that's it. People, if you have any questions, you can go on my personal page and then tag Jason, and he'll be able to answer you. And that's it. Thank you so much for coming. I will let you all know who's next Sunday on the show. Jason, it was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm very easy to find. Instagram is You Winning Life. That's also the name of my podcast. So Dr. Monty, Dr. Newberg, Dr. Walker founded, there's some episodes about NET as well as some other stuff. So if people want more of those resources, again, it's You Winning Life. Very easy to find.
Amazing. Have a good night, everybody.